Now, before you get started working with databases and using the language of SQL, you need to have the correct tools and environment on your computer installed so that you can do this work. So we need to download a couple of pieces of software from a company called MySQL. Now, one of these pieces of software is called the Workbench, and one is called the Server. And both these pieces of software are completely free, as long as you get the Community Edition. I'm going to make sure to send you the direct links though, so that you don't go to the links for the premium software that you'd have to pay for and is not needed for this seminar. Now, to explain what these pieces of software are, the Workbench is the graphical user interface, so it's what you see on the screen, it's how you interact with the software, where you type your code, and it's what you'll see whilst we're doing the seminar. The server is what's going on in the background. It enables you to create the databases on your computer, and you don't really need to know much more than that. All you need to know is that there's a back end and there's a front end, and that you need to install both of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to download these files. I'm using a Mac, so I'm just going to make sure that I've clicked the Mac operating system, but the website should recognize what what operating system you're using. And I'm just going to go to download, and you'll see that it's going to prompt you for if you want to create an account with MySQL. It's not necessary. You can just go here to no thanks and start my download, and that's just going to get started. I'm going to do the same again for the server. Now, if you've got a brand new Mac or brand new Windows, I'm sure it'll look very similar to this. You can just go straight here and go on the top download here. I'm actually using a slightly older one to do this screen recording, so I'm going to go to the archives and dig out one that is more suitable for my computer. But for the sake of just showing you what to do, I'm just going to go here to download. And again, it's going to ask us if we want to create an account. I'm going to go no thanks to start my download. And now that's going to get running. So we're just going to wait for these files to both download, and then we'll get straight into the installation process. So now that both our files have finished downloading, we're ready to get into the installation process. So we have the server file and we have the Workbench. Now we're going to get started with the server first and then install the Workbench, because the Workbench is the graphical user interface that builds on top of the server in the background. So we're going to get started with the server. Now, of course, from this step here, we can see that I'm running a Mac, so the installation steps are going to be very different for a Windows computer. But what I'm going to demonstrate is that both files are very easy to install. The one thing to note with server is that you have to declare a password for what is the user. It's called the root, but just interpret this as a username. We're going to see this now, but for Windows, that's the one thing to note. So I'm going to double click on the PKG file. I'm going to click continue, and then most of this is just clicking continue, so I agree to the license. I'm going to install. I'm just going to put my password here. And here we get to the configuration step. So it's going to ask us what type of password we want to use. Now, I'd actually recommend using the legacy password encryption, especially for old MacBooks. I've noticed this is very good. I'm not too sure for Windows, but for the sake of what we're doing today in the seminar, I'd use the legacy password encryption to avoid any issues going down the line. So I'm going to go to next. I'm just going to put in a password that I use for these kinds of activities, and then it's going to ask if we want to start MySQL Server. We're going to leave this on and click finish. Again, put my password in and just let this finish initializing. So that's now done. Nothing's going to pop up. The server is going to be running in the background, but we're now ready to install the Workbench. So I'm going to double click on the Workbench, this file. I'm going to copy the application to the applications folder. Of course, this is very specific to Mac users. For Windows, this is, I think, probably a bit more straightforward. We're going to just let these files copy. This just takes a few seconds. And that's now copied. So I can double click on the application, and that's now going to pop up. And now the installation is finished. So now we can see that we have the MySQL Workbench, which is the graphical user interface, and we're ready to get started. So what we need to do is we need to click on the connection here. Now, one thing to note is that sometimes there might be issues with Mac with this connection. So before we do that, we're just going to go to System Preferences. You should see a MySQL logo here. And just check that there is an active instance. So if it's not, you would click here and go to Start MySQL Server. But as mine is running, I'm not going to click that. I'm just going to close this. So this should all be working. So now when I click on the connection, it's going to open the MySQL Workbench editor. And this is where we're going to do all the SQL coding and where we're going to learn more about the SQL language in this seminar.